When I saw the NuPhy Air75 for the first time, my initial reaction was, what is this and how can I get one? Design is always subjective to the recipient, and in this case, me being the recipient was and is still very pleased. I didn't pull the trigger though, as I have just recently moved away from low profile boards, although this isn't your typical shallow disappointment. Despite its appearance, it's fully mechanical. Still, I enjoy them taller. To my surprise, a good friend of mine, let's call him Mr. S, actually won one of these in an Instagram raffle. I don't know what surprised me more, the fact that he won one or that there was an Instagram raffle which wasn't a scam. Needless to say, he received his board along with some neat accessories and promptly shipped them to me. He also sent me his old NuPhy F1. That's right, he's a full-on NuPhile.
That's a good one. I should have opened with that one.
Anyway, I've used this board for the past 3 weeks now, working with it on a daily basis, playing games, editing videos, and while I still think it looks fantastic, I'm also glad to finally send it back. Because for me, this just isn't a good choice. Before we get into the interesting part, let's ruin the chance of this video ever doing well by talking about the F1 first. As mentioned, Mr. S is an avid NuPhy user. He bought the F1 about 10 months ago, roughly around the same time I got my K6, but his use case is very different from mine. While I use my Keycap entirely stationary, he takes his to the office or on the road. That's actually a primary selling point of the F1 and to some extent the Air75, having the feeling of a true mechanical keyboard while still keeping a very small footprint. Included case can also serve as a mobile stand for all you coffee shop typists out there. Or you can place the F1 directly onto a MacBook, as it neatly rests on the native keyboard with its rubber sorry about this. In its original form, this F1 actually had a rubberized bottom. However, Mr. S in his infinite wisdom has decided to remove it, leaving the bottom bare and attaching foam pads? In his own words, he said, "I've made it much better." Well, we all make mistakes, Mr. S. It's okay. It's part of life. The good thing is, once it's over, you'll be punished accordingly. But let's get back to the point. The reason why I'm rambling on about the F1 is that, to me, the Air75 is so much better in almost every single way. The F1 feels a bit cheap, although a big part of that might be contributed to the exposed underbelly, which was never supposed to see the light of day. But I cannot unsee it. The frame doesn't feel too great either, although it is made of metal, it's more akin to plastic when being touched. The misfortune doesn't end here. Although the badge on the back is reminiscent of premium custom keyboards and their weights, this one breaks the illusion upon closer inspection as the writing is crooked to a point that it almost looks a bit goofy. I didn't spend enough time using this board to justify an opinion regarding the typing experience, but in the short amount that I did try, I noticed that the spacing of the keys felt a bit off. Even though the board is smaller, they're further apart than what I'm used to. The feeling wasn't that great either. The Kale chalk switches are too shallow for my taste, but it might actually be the caps that hindered my enjoyment the most. They're so slippery that I barely managed to type a single word without errors. But then again, this is very subjective, and you, along with Mr. S, might actually really enjoy this type of typing experience. Also, full disclaimer here, it's not like I know how it feels like to type on the highest of endgame boards. All I have to compare it to are my old Craft, the G Pro Wireless and my Keycap, but all of them feel better than this. Which is why I'm so relieved that the Air75 is better in every single way. Well, almost. The Air75 is, just like the name suggests, a 75% keyboard which you can currently pre-order on NuPhy.com. Even though this board is just ever so slightly thicker, it comes with a hot swappable PCB as well as MX style switches, foregoing the chalks we just learned about, meaning you have a very large selection of existing keycaps that will fit this board. For example, you could create this on Holy Union. The top aluminium frame is similar to that of the F1, but feels more solid, more refined. The chamfered edges give it a nice touch, and you have these neat RGB strips that run along both sides. They look a lot nicer than the camera was able to capture, but more on that later. On the back side, you'll find the left aligned USB-C port for a wired connection or for charging with the included cable. However, there is no indication during charging, which is a bit of a pity. On the right side, you'll get two switches, one to change between wireless, wired and off, and one to change between Windows and Mac. Flipping the board around, you'll be treated to a nice frosted look along with a familiar NuPhy badge, nicely leveled this time too. We also get 4 non-removable rubber feet in a neat teal colorway, which brings me to the first noticeable improvement over the F1. Whereas the original had a fixed angle, the Air75 gets these magnetic rubber feet to give it a bit more lift. As a person who always picks the steepest incline, I much appreciate this. Continuing with the improvements, this board also features a 2.4 GHz wireless connection next to the Bluetooth ones. This is actually something that I absolutely love. I will always prefer wireless, even if it's Bluetooth, which sometimes can be a bit dodgy as mentioned in my Keycron video. Other issues like the time it takes to reconnect can be annoying, not here though. Even when the board is fully asleep, which happens after about 30 minutes of inactivity, it responds and connects instantly, just like it did on my good old Logitech boards. This is such a great feature that if Keycron would release a K6 with a dongle, I would upgrade in a heartbeat. The connection process is straightforward too. Hitting function and holding one of the number keys between 1 and 4 will enter pairing mode, indicated by the blinking light strip on the left. The 4th profile will also act as your 2.4G connection, meaning that you can have either 4 Bluetooth devices paired or 3 when the 4th is being used with a dongle. To connect to the dongle, you have to unplug it first. Hold function 4 for a couple of seconds until it starts blinking again, then plug it in and you should be good. You can also change between the profiles and type on multiple devices using this board, increasing your productivity tenfold for sure. If you're like me though and have a Windows machine while using an iPad, you also have to manually switch between the modes. The light strips aren't just for pairing either, they serve more functions. The left one will glow white when the caps lock is engaged, and the right one will flash white or blue when you change between Mac and Windows. You can also change the right one to show the battery level, either by holding function pipe or using function bracket to permanently display the status. Using function pipe again will switch back to the default setting. For the different lighting modes, you can choose one out of 5, including off. Mine was set to a vertical rainbow transition by default. Holding down function question mark and using the left arrow key, you can cycle through them. We have the mentioned vertical rainbow, a pulsating rainbow, a single solid color, and a pulsating single color. The last 2 you can also set it to one of the 7 available colors by hitting the right arrow key. You can also adjust the brightness on all of these settings by using the top and down arrow keys. And finally, you can also turn everything off and just display the battery status, which is pretty neat. Moving on to the RGB on the keys, we have many more options to choose from here. This is done the same way, just without the question mark. So function left key will cycle through the different modes, while up and down keys will act as brightness adjustments, and the right key is the modifier for single color modes again. Fun fact here, the color profile of the keys changes with the system mode, meaning you can choose different lighting options between Windows and Mac, making it easier to distinguish what profile you're on without having to look at the switch on the back. For some weird reason though, this does not apply for the light strip, which is set globally. With all these effects, it's a bit of a pity then that the included keycaps aren't shine through like on the F1. Speaking of keycaps, let's talk about those. The standard keycap set that comes with the Air75 is the light one seen here. You can opt for the extra Twilight caps, which will set you back an additional $19 when ordering with the board, or $28.95 separately. The caps themselves are PBT and reminiscent of the XDA profile, meaning that they have a larger surface area with a slightly flatter profile than Cherry, and equal height among all rows. You'll also get additional modifier keys in the box for the different operating systems, along with a keycap and switch combo puller. For the switches, the board came with low profile Gator and Reds, although you'll get a single clicky blue and a tactile brown switch to try out as well. At first I thought I could actually put on regular switches because they looked so similar to my Cherries, but as you can see here, the pins are offset differently and the big chunker in the middle is fatter on the low profile one. You can, however, or I've heard that you can, loop these switches just like the bigger ones. I don't have a switch opener, but looking at the clamps tells me that this will be a lot more time consuming, even if you do have one. Looking inside the switch, we can see a compressed spring in the middle, along with the usual suspects. I have to say that these feel great, and this might be one of the few low-profile boards which you can mod this easily. The travel is pretty much the same as on the chalk switches from the F1. It might be the caps or the way that they bottom out. Whatever it is, they feel much better. The stabilizers are pretty decent as well. They came pre-looped from the factory and the board sounded very pleasing to me out of the box. Because of the Amex style stems, you can also put a lot of existing keycaps on there if you want. Nobody is going to stop you, even SA caps will fit, although this is a rather silly look. Vice versa, you can put the Air75 caps on other boards, like on a Keycron for example. Alright, so we got all the good things out of the way. At this point you might be thinking, this is pretty decent, right? Yes, I believe for a lot of people this is pretty much what they were waiting for. It's a great low profile board. First, let's talk about those switches. While removing the keycaps, I frequently pulled out the entire switch along with it. This is technically not really an issue, and I'm not sure if this is just normal for low profile switches, but it's still an unnecessary annoyance, especially after having to remove all of the caps multiple times to try out different combos for this video. An unlikely scenario for the average user for sure, but after the 5th time of pulling the caps, having to manually put the switches back in started to really get on my nerves. Then there's the inconsistent lettering of the keycaps. Now, this is common with dye sublimation, but the degree to which they vary here is higher than I would tolerate. Just look at this row here. I am nitpicking for sure, but I can't unsee this. Then there are the magnetic feet. Although I'm very happy to have them, I do feel that this magnetic implementation is a bit flimsy. They aren't the strongest magnets, and if you're carrying this board around without the case, you can easily lose them in a backpack. Or you might actually lose them during a posture rearrangement while being at your desk. The small groove to line up the rubber feet doesn't help to get them back on easily either. It's a bit finicky and I try to do it blindly, to varying success.
Oh, Smithers, guide me in.
My pleasure, sir.
Then there is the rattling. The magnets in the board aren't secured and are simply lying in a tray. If you take one of the feet and hover over them, you can trigger it manually. I tried to open up the board in order to see if I could add a bit of foam to silence them, which is where the next problem appeared. I wasn't actually able to do so because there were 2 screws that were fastened so tightly that I started to strip them. I abandoned the plan and took a closer look. It seems that NuPhy is using wood screws here, or at least something that looks like wood screws to me. Now, I'm not an expert handyman on this matter, so take this with a grain of salt. But from what I know, screws with a pointed tip like this are usually used to get into places where there are no holes. You can even see how they contain bits of plastic that they dug out. For electronics and especially smaller parts, you'll usually get more finely threaded ones like these. Now, all of this really doesn't matter for your day-to-day use. You're not going to hear the rattling, nor will you have an issue with how this was put together, until you have to repair it. If the battery breaks or dies, for example, replacing it might break something permanently, or you won't be able to do it at all if you can't take it apart like me. Then there is the case, with which I have a bit of a love and hate relationship. On one hand, I find this design to be ingenious. I love clever things, and this is clever. It protects your board while giving you the option of placing your mobile device on it. For a coffee shop typist, this might be all you need to get that next novel done. But here we go again with my ramblings. For me, who can't live without that elevation and who is too incompetent to quickly attach the feet, I want to carry these with the case. Now, you can do that, but it has these grooves designed to take the board without them, and if you do add the feet, the top row is being squished and the magnets lose their strength, leaving the board a bit more insecure while being in its designed for enclosure. The magnets are also generally a lot weaker than on the F1. The Air75 is heavier for sure, but they still feel too weak for my taste. Again, technically a non-issue, but let's continue. I don't know how these will be shipped to customers, but looking at other YouTube videos and unboxings of this board, all of them had dents on the boxes, and so were the ones that I received. And I'm sure Mr. S didn't purposely kick it around before shipping it to me. There was no damage of any kind to the goods. Still, I like nice packaging. This is very nice packaging, so it's unfortunate that it got banged up. Oh, and one last bit. There is a dedicated Cortana button, and on Windows 11 where Cortana has retired, the button for some reason starts Microsoft Teams. There is no official software to change this from NuPhy directly, but I tried out Sharp Keys, which lets you remap any key to whatever you want. Unfortunately though, I wasn't able to do this with this key. If you change it, it will also change the function of the Windows key, and that one I use quite often. There is also a cut button which works great on macOS and iOS, but has no function at all on Windows. This one as well cannot be remapped. In fact, if you're on Windows, it won't even trigger anything. Before I get into my final thoughts, if you want to skip ahead to hear the typing sounds of the Air75, you can use the bookmarks in the description below. The Air75 might be a perfect board for you. Maybe all the things that I didn't like are a non-issue, and if you like typing on flat profiles and are in need of a portable solution, or if you just like the way it looks, which admittedly is a very good reason, this board is for you. In my 3 weeks, I just couldn't get used to the typing experience. Ever since I switched to the SA caps, I have been in love with them. Typing feels unleashed. But the flat profile just isn't for me. And then there's the issue with quality. All of this, the caps, the screws, the feet, the packaging, the entire experience paints a picture of unfortunate cost savings for an otherwise really great product. That's what bothers me the most about this. On paper and on screen, this thing looks amazing, but it feels almost unfinished. The design is super clean and unique, which I personally love, and the board has so many clever elements. Despite its great looks and arguably great features, I'll have to pass. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope this didn't come across as too negative, but I do feel like NuPhy is so close to making this perfect. Nonetheless, I hope you liked it. There are a few more keyboard related things coming up next, which one will be determined by the great gods of shipping, so stay tuned if you're interested in that sort of thing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, enjoy the typing sounds, and see you in the next one. Bye!